Hello everyone, this is Dan and this is the update video for week 10 spring of 2014. Just got done with spring break and looking forward to the last push here in our final weeks. We're in the thick of it now with chapters 7 through 9 and wanted to make sure you're kind of aware of the way these are organized. So I'm going to go into course content here, chapters 7, 8, and 9. Before spring break we did 7.2, 8.2, 8.3, and 9.2. These all had to do with 1 and 2 proportion sample hypothesis tests and confidence intervals. Now we're moving into the means section. And in the means section, we're going to be doing confidence intervals and hypothesis tests for 1 sample mean and 2 sample means. And then we'll actually get into a little bit with dependent samples or with paired data. So that's what we're doing this week. We're going to end up looking at a new distribution, and it's called the T distribution. So there's a few good applets here about using the T distribution. I want to make sure you know where to find, and so the sections are 7.3, 8.4, 9.3, and 9.4. So those are the 4 sections for homework we're doing this week. And the first due date will be next Monday, March 31st, for the sections we did before spring break. But I would encourage you to get a start on those. So I'm going to actually go into StatCrunch right now and just remind you that if you start feeling comfortable with how to do these, you can always go into Stat. For instance, we did the ones in proportions, and let's say you did 1 sample with summary, you could actually put in, here's the successes, here's the total, and do hypothesis and confidence intervals. And there's a YouTube video that's posted in Blackboard as well on that. But just want to remind you that this is another option if you start feeling comfortable using, the traditional method of doing it. So if I go back in here to course content chapters 7, 8, and 9, if I go into the textbook and review materials, here's the formula sheets. So we know about the z-table, and we've got the formula sheet here, and the t-table is the new one here. So I'm going to load both those. So these first 2 are what we did with proportions. Now we're doing confidence intervals for means. Now if we have known parameters, we're going to use sigma. If we know the population standard deviation, but usually we don't. And if we don't, we can't use a normal distribution. So we're going to use T, which is called the student's T distribution. And so we're going to use these 3 primarily. 1 sample mean, the difference between 2 sample means, and this is the same, this is paired data, or the same people being tested twice, or data that is like, for instance, the age of a husband and wife. So those are the 3 we're primarily going to use. In the student's T distribution, I've got it pulled up here. If we look at this, it's got, imagine it is the normal distribution, but based on the degrees of freedom or the sample size, it dictates the shape. And there's some good applets on that Blackboard side I'd like you to look at. But so if we look down, if we have infinite sample sizes, these numbers should look familiar to you. That means as the sample size goes to infinity, we end up getting the normal distribution. So for instance, two-tailed probability 0.05. That's the 95% confidence interval kind of thing. Two tails 1.96. That should look familiar. And as you can see, the confidence levels are right here as well, which are similar to the ones you have on this formula sheet right here. So, but as the sample size gets smaller, you can see these numbers get bigger. So if I had like a sample size of 20, and use degrees of freedom of n minus 1, which is 19, then we're going to use 2.093 instead of 1.96. So that just means the t distribution is a little more spread out than the z. It allows us to assume a little more error. And this is powerful because we can use smaller sample sizes instead of having to have large sample sizes or enough to know that they're nearly normal looking before and actually the guy who came up with this worked at the Guinness Brewery. His name was Gossett, and he wanted to make smaller samples to check the quality of the beer there. So he actually came up with this, and so he figured out, hey, what if I only draw 4 samples out? and I already know the mean and standard deviation. How close can I get? And he did it with 5. He did this all by hand, and this is what he came up with, but he couldn't put his name on it because Guinness Brewery said we didn't want to give away trade secrets, but he's like, well, this has to do with everything, not just what we're doing. So he finally convinced him to publish it under a different name, and he called it the Student's T distribution. So this is what we're looking at this week. But the idea is the same as the Z, except for your T multipliers will have to come from this table. You have to degrees of freedom, and then what level of one and two tail. If you're looking to just one tail, right or left, and then if it's two tail, that splits the alpha in half. So hope that helps a little. And make sure you have a printout of this and become familiar with how to use these. And then next week we'll be moving on to deviations, hypothesis tests for or confidence intervals for that, and we'll also do F tests for variations. So that's next week. But just want to show you all that, and those tables will be found here as well. And the last thing I want to show you to remind you of, if you feel comfortable now with just the idea of hypothesis testing, this is the only discussion. It's called the hypothesis test discussion for all 3 of these chapters, 7, 8, and 9. And this is you making up your own hypothesis test and then answering all these questions about it, and gives you an example. So this is, and actually if you go back to what we did in even chapter 1, the chapter 1 discussion was doing experimental design. You could even use this idea, but now you could say, okay, here's the experiment I want to run. Here's my null and alternative hypothesis. Here's the way I would calculate a test statistic. Here's my type 1 and type 2 errors, things like that. So you could actually use this idea if you liked it and apply it to these chapters again, or come up with a brand new idea if you've thought of something else you'd like to do a hypothesis test about. So hope this video helps you get ready for this week. Again, make sure you're staying up with your homework. I posted the notes from before, and I'll be posting those again. Remember, for the chapters, it says notes from the spring class, so there's the ones about proportions. You can find those on Blackboard if you need a little help. So have a great week, and we'll hopefully see you at the office hour on Monday night.